Right. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. My name is Trin. I'm one of the F2, currently working in the Heath Hospital in Cardiff. So this is our fourth session of our survival guide teaching webinar sessions, and today we'll be talking about the TURAS eportfolio and also about some details about the ARCP really. I was planning to show you guys the website by sharing my screen, but as I said, there's something with my Wi-Fi, so it's not that reliable at the moment. So I did some screenshots, so hopefully that will be sufficient. At any point, if you guys have any questions or if there's any issue in terms of the video or slides, just shout out or pop something on the message on the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end or as we go along then. Right, if there's nothing for everyone, then I'll just move on then. So this is a kind of sessions that we have planned. As you can see, we are at session 4 at the moment, so we'll be talking about the eportfolio and about ARCP. But there will be three more sessions later this month and in July. So do join us for those sessions. And if you want any updates on the events, you can always join, kind of like us on Facebook, our page, and you'll be updated there. The session is recorded, so we will post the link for the recording after the session if there's anyone who needs to leave halfway then. Right. And of course, if everyone's happy to fill in a feedback form, that would be very helpful. I promise this is a very short one, so 1 to 2 minutes will be sufficient, and honest feedback will be welcome as well. So moving on to today's topic. So we will be talking about two big topics. So it's about TURAS eportfolio and ARCP. If you're from Wales, you might have heard about TURAS. So this is the system that we use for our portfolio in Wales. I think they use it in Scotland and Ireland as well. And in England, I think they use HORAS, if I'm not mistaken, but don't quote me on that. And ARCP, which is basically the sign off for your F1, F2 years at the end of the year, which we'll talk about a bit more at the end. So as you can see, this is the website. That's the link. And what happens is when you key in that link is you come to this website here on the right. And once you click please sign in, this is the website, the kind of screen that you see. You key in your email address, your password, and just make sure that you're going into the right website, because there has been some changes over the years. So do not use the old ones, use the new one, and try to make sure that you're using the right one as well. I would recommend bookmarking the website as well, so that it'll be easier for you to go on it in the future. Another thing to make sure is that your email address is your updated email address, and don't use your unique email address that will be gone by that time. So this is the home page once you sign in. As you can see, that's my homepage there. There's a few things that you can see straight away. There is the top bar, which has all the important things that you will go through later. And here you can see the ticket status in the middle. That's basically tickets that you have received or sent, and what are the status, whether they have been completed or not. As you can see, there's one that hasn't been completed, and I can click remind if I need to. And at the bottom here, there's a quick reflection starter. We can talk a bit more about reflection later. They're quite useful in terms of kind of linking your curriculums. On the right here, there is a progress summary, which you can click to them. As you can see here on the left, if you click through each of them, it will show you what you have done, kind of your overall summary of your portfolio. and whether you have achieved what is required really. So as you can see here, in terms of the curriculum I have for F2, I've linked 24 of 15 of the curriculum for professional behavior. So that kind of gives you an idea of whether you have achieved it or not. And it's the same for all SLEs, tabs, reflections, and the teaching logs as well. And the bottom here, in terms of current status, it will tell you who your education supervisor is for the whole year, clinical supervisor for each block, and the program directors. So generally what happens is that your education supervisor will be the supervisor for your first block, and he will be both the educational and clinical supervisor for your first block. And the second block will be your clinical supervisor, but your education supervisor should be the same for the whole year. Any questions up to this point? It's quite simple then. Okay. So these are all the drop-down menus for the bar at the top. We go through them one by one. So there's the forms, which has quite a lot, really, but they're all quite simple. Once you, we'll go through them in a minute. And there's the curriculum, tickets, reflections, training. So you click through each of them, and it's quite straightforward to direct you to the forms or page that you want to. So the first form, as you can see here, is declarations. So here it would tell you, this is something that you can do in the beginning once you get your login for your portfolio. Make sure that you sign all the forms. As you can see, there are 3 forms for each year, 3 for F1, 3 for F1 years, and 3 for F2 years. Make sure to sign them off and read through them. They're quite simple, just a few declarations in terms of health and condition, but nothing too serious. But make sure that you sign them off because you need to sign this declaration for you to pass your ARCP. And then moving on, the second one will be core procedures. So they are required for F1 year only and not for F2. We'll go through that in when we talk about ARCP. But basically, it's the same as I'm sure in medical school, where you do a procedure, have someone observe, fill in the forms. You can fill in 2 different forms. One would be filling in right there and then, or one you can fill in at home and send through an email to the supervisor and ask them to fill in whenever they have time. But that's quite straightforward, really. Then you had the supervised learning events. This is the form that you probably use the most, really. As you can see, there are 4 different forms, and each form has 2 different links to it. The one at the top is when your supervisor is happy to fill it in when straight away after your kind of learning event, or the second one would be after and you get an email and then you send it through email to them to get them to fill in after. As you can see here, this is a sample of the form on the right. That is for a CBD. And if you read through them, they're quite straightforward. What post you are at the moment, the date, title, a bit description, make sure there is no patient identifiable information, everything is anonymized. Which setting, what you have discussed in terms of the problems, and the encounter. At the bottom, it will be filled in by the assessor. If you do fill in a ticket for your supervisor to do it later, make sure you get their email address that they are constantly checking, just because sometimes if they give you an email that they don't use often, it will get missed, which is not something you want to do, really. And also get their full name, what level they are, and also if they can give them, you get their GMC number as well, because those are details that you will need to fill in a form to fill in later. So moving on, this is the third form. It will be a tab form. We'll talk about how many you need to do for ARCP later. But basically, you need to fill it in a self-tab right here at the bottom right here. You click that, you fill in a form. It has a few questions, really simple questions. And after that, you basically get email address of people you want them to fill in the tab form for you, and you send it to them. There are links for you to remind them. Unfortunately, I've already completed mine, so I can't really do a screenshot of them of how it looks like. But it's basically like other forms. You send the email, and you can keep reminding them after a few days if they don't fill it in for you. So mandatory certificates in Wales, there for F1 you have 3 certificates you need to be done before your ARCP for F1: the PSA, ILS, and also a resuscitation refresher if you're in southeast area of Wales. And for F2 you will have to have an ALS. In most cases you will probably be doing ALS course in F1. So if you have that done, make sure you upload it as soon as possible, as soon as you get your certificate, so that you don't forget. And you can link them to your curriculum, which I'll show you in a minute then. Personal development plans, they are very useful and looked upon when doing ARCP. What you do is you record a PDP, and it's basically learning objectives throughout your year or each post. There are a lot of resources online that are useful in terms of what to write in for your PDPs. And you can constantly update them, add things to them as you go on. But it is something that you will have to discuss with your supervisor, and if they're happy, they can make changes to it and improve upon your written PDPs. But very important thing to do in the beginning of each block with your supervisor. So I'm looking at the chat and there's a question. Can you upload your ILS certificate that we did in 5th year for the F1 ILS requirement? That's a good question. I think the ILS certificate is depends on how long it is valid for. If it's valid throughout your whole F1 year, then of course you can do that. But if it let's say it says it's valid until July of this 2021, then it wouldn't be possible for you to upload it, and you'll need either an ILS refresher or probably just an ALS course to do and upload it after. But yeah, as I mentioned in my previous session, make sure you check with your kind of F1 director or manager in when will you be able to do the ALS course as soon as possible, and set the date so that you can apply for study leave and everything else, and arrange time for you to kind of revise and study before you have your ALS course as well. Because it is a good course and people do fail it sometimes. So make sure you have enough time and energy to go for them. Hopefully that answers your question. Okay, so yeah, like I said, back to PDPs, yeah, these are kind of a few links at the top here that you can use, which I have very good advice in terms of how to write your PDPs and how to achieve them. Okay, moving on. So one of the drop-down menus shows that about tickets. So there are 2 choices, the ones that you create and one that you receive. For F1, you probably won't receive any tickets except for kind of core procedures, I would assume. But for F2s, you'll get a bit more, as you can see here. So creating tickets will all show, the tickets that you create will all show on this link here. And if you can see whether it's been completed or incomplete, as you can see on the form status here. And on the action side, if you click on it, you can click on whether to send a reminder, you want to update it, or you want to see details about it as well. And for tickets received, you can fill in the tickets that people have sent you as well. Reflection forms, they are quick to do, easy to do. Basically, it's about reflecting on things that you've done and learned, or mistakes that you've made, or discussions you've had with your seniors or colleagues. and you can write everything down on the reflection form. And they are useful, as I mentioned before, is because you can link them to your curriculum. So we'll go through all the curriculums later when we talk about ARCP, but what you need to do is link to each supervised learning events, reflection, kind of teaching, or any sort of forms that you fill in. You have to link them to the curriculum, which I'll show you in a minute. So it says here, will we get separate training on ARCP at all? Do you meet in this session, or? So if you're talking about in this session, we'll talk about it at the end of this session. Hopefully that's, oh, in FY1. I would say they don't really talk much about it. I mean, I didn't really get much talk about it in my F1 year. You basically just need to kind of read through all the documents online about what you get, what you need for ARCP. They usually send you a lot of reminders closer to the end of the year, around May time, to remind you. But not really much about how to pass your ARCP, unfortunately. I mean, that's my personal experience. Okay, so moving on, achievements are those are the things that you can put in, like teaching you've done, surveys, any presentation, whether you've attended courses or conferences. They all can be put down in achievements. Those are things that you think will help you pass your ARCP or put you at a better spot in terms of passing. But yeah, those are extra stuff that you can add in, really, to make yourself in a better position when you have the ARCP. And here it is about teaching. So there's two different sides for teaching. There's the e-learning side and also the mandatory teaching log. So we talk about the e-learning first. E-learning, there's a few specific websites that they use. So you can see here, LIFT and ELFH, e-learning for healthcare. Those are sites that they use. What you do is you click on those websites. There are links on that web page itself, and they'll bring you to the e-learning website. You can search for courses that you are interested in, or mandatory courses that you need to do, like manual handling or safeguarding. Those are the typical ones. And once you've done them on those websites, it will automatically update on the TURAS eportfolio website. It will take a while before it gets updated, but it will get updated. So going back to question, sorry, but achievements are specific for that year or cumulative amount of achievements. Course instructor keep track of it. So it is accumulative. You can add it from F1 and we'll consider in F2. Of course, when you put it in F1, it will be specific for F1, but it will be seen in your F2 year as well. No, not stuff you've done in med school. It's probably stuff you've done in your foundation years. Yeah, stuff that you've done in your foundation years. Yeah. Okay. But yeah, e-learning, great way for you to tick off some of the curriculum as well. Sorry, I keep mentioning about the curriculums, but they're very difficult for you to link. But there are some such as kind of end of life care or safeguarding, and those are easily ticked off, linked to using kind of e-learning that you've done. So mandatory teaching log, this has changed a lot over the last few years in terms of number of hours, but this is where you log in teaching hours that you've done throughout your foundation years. So what happens is there are foundation teaching, depending on which hospital you are, probably every week or every fortnight, and you log them into this link here. And here is a sample of it, basically the date, the title of the session, what type of session it is, and number of hours. What you can put in a brief description of what was learned, but it has a maximum number of words you can put in, so you don't have to put in a lot of details really. And if you do have evidence of what you've done during a teaching, you can upload a document about it as well. But what it does is that it adds up your number of hours, and there is a minimum number of hours of teaching you need for a whole year. Unfortunately, the foundation schools in different hospitals are quite bad at kind of organizing teaching sessions. So sometimes you realize that even if you attend all the foundation teaching sessions organized by your foundation school, you might not meet the minimum requirement number of hours, especially now in COVID times, everything is online, it might be even difficult. So what I would suggest is if you do have kind of teaching in your kind of departmental teaching, include those in your teaching log as well. If you feel like those topics are considered core topics for foundation years, then you can add them as core hours. But if they are non-core hours, let's say it is about pediatric kind of life support, then those are considered non-core. Does that make sense then? Any questions? Okay, let's move on then. Reflection forms, like I said, very useful to link. So here is an example of how you link them. So if let's say this is one of the reflection I've done, and you click on actions and link, it will bring you to a site with all the curriculums, and you choose which curriculum is related to the reflection you've done or the supervised learning events you've done. And then you can link them to it. And if I'm not mistaken, you can link to a maximum of 5 kind of curriculum to one reflection or supervised learning events or a e-learning session you've done. So here is a kind of this is what I've taken from the website for foundation training, and it basically tells you what they are expecting you in terms of professional capabilities and curriculum that they want you to achieve throughout your F1 year. I will be giving you the website later so that you can just Google foundation training, and you can get this off anywhere really. But it's good to read through just to make sure you're familiar with what you're expected to achieve. They're all quite basic stuff, so it shouldn't be a problem for you to achieve. And I'm sure all of you will have a chance to experience all of this really. So this is all the forms. I don't think I've missed any of them. As you can see on the forms, there's a few more, but I'm not going to go through all of them. Supervisor forms, so there are forms you have to fill in with your educational supervisor, clinical supervisor. So altogether, there should be 6 forms you need to fill in for supervisor for the whole year. But it can get a bit complicated because there are combined clinical and education supervisor forms for your first supervisor for your first post. And then there's just clinical supervisor forms for the second post and third post, and education supervisor forms for the second, third post. So it's a bit confusing, but make sure you kind of have a list and tick them off before your ARCP at the end of the year. We talk about mandatory certificates, quality improvement. If you've done any projects, you can add them to it. It's just a bit about topic, date, just a bit of brief description, and you can upload some evidence if you have any as well. And Form R is a form that you fill in before you have your ARCP in the end of the year. It basically asks you about how your year went, what post you've done, were there any kind of time off work, or just kind of basic stuff about your whole year. But you have to complete a Form R before ARCP, or you will not pass your ARCP. So it's definitely something you have to make sure you remember to do before at the end. Right. So training progression, so ARCP, as you can see, annual review of competence progression. There is a panel every year that kind of goes through your portfolio and make sure that you've done what you are expected to do in your F1, F2 year, and they're happy for you to progress to the next year. And it is required every year, and everything in your portfolio will be considered during this process. And after, as you can see here, this is my ARCP from last year, and from the outcome, you can see that it's outcome 1 and it's completed. So I passed my ARCP for F1, obviously. But yeah, you can see all the completed forms here at the bottom. If unfortunately you did get any other outcomes, you'll be contacted personally, and they'll speak to you and discuss to you how you can kind of make up for it, maybe in the next few months before you move on to the next year, F2 year, or if you need to redo the whole year. So there's different outcomes. So it's all very personalized, very discussion-based, and there are different ways for different kind of outcomes, really. So here, this is a document you can find online as well. I'll give you a link later. This is all the requirements you're needed for to pass your ARCP, basically. Don't quote me on this because I think this is kind of available until September, and things might change after September because this requirement has changed quite a lot because of COVID. It might go back to the old kind of requirements. I'm not too sure, but it'd be good if you can check it again around August, September time. What requirements are required for you for your F1, F2 year? As you can see, going through the table, there are kind of, the first one is easy. So basically you have to do 12 months of F1 or F2 and you're done. And the number of time off you can have is written there as well. Moving on, there is the education supervisor end of year report. Then there's the education supervisor end of placement report. So end of year is the form that your supervisor fills in at the end of the year itself, and the end of placement is for education supervisor is for the first block. So it is a bit confusing. So make sure that your supervisor is aware of the difference and not fill in the wrong form. Then there's clinical supervisor forms that you need to fill in, which are quite simple. CAT forms, core procedures. Then there is the direct DOPs, mini CACs and CBDs. As you can see here, the number of required is different in terms of the user standard and the standard for this year. So like I said, check how many you need to do next year. And then there's the developing a clinical teacher, basically teach a session and upload the evidence and show that you've actually participated in a teaching session. PSA, I'm sure most of you have passed it, but make sure you save the certificate and upload it so that you can tick that off as soon as possible. ILS or ALS, then tick those off, reimburse certificate, upload. Evidence of QI projects or kind of audits. Once you're done, upload that, tick those off, done. And also kind of attendance of teaching session is the last one at the end. As I said, check the number of hours that is required because they changed it quite a lot. So with audits, I don't know, you can only include audits you've done in the F1, F2 year. Unfortunately, you can't do one. You can't include those that you've done in medical school, unfortunately, unless you're working in the hospital and that you're continuing an audit that you started in medical school in the same hospital. So that means that you are doing a QI project in that hospital, continuing on from your foundation years. If you're doing that, then you can include it. But if you're doing it in med school, but in a different hospital than the one in foundation years, then you can't include it. Is that clear? I'm not confusing anyone, am I? Okay. Any questions in terms of requirements? So like I said, make sure you check again in August, September, whether things have changed or not. Okay. All right. So now talking about ARCP, it usually happens at the end of May, and it goes on for about 2 weeks. And after 2 weeks, or within that 2 weeks, you'll be told about the outcome, and how whether you've passed your ARCP basically. There are a number of different outcomes, which I'll show you here. There you go. So this is the outcomes available for this year. It might be different next year. If that, like I said, you need to check again when you start. But yeah, as you can see, there's code 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. So as you can see for my F1 year, I had an outcome 1, which means I satisfactory completion of F1. So there is no need for any additional requirements or discussion needed. But as you can see, you can read through the different outcomes and see if you do get any of them, what is going to happen. But like I said, it's all about discussing, and it's very personalized in terms of what you do moving forward, really. And this is kind of in terms of the process, what happens. This is for F1 and this is for F2. Left for F1, right for F2. Outcome 1, as you can see, all done, tick, 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 nothing else. Then there's 3, 4, 5, and other outcomes. And here it tells you what will happen and how to go moving on. I'm not going to go through it all because it's quite similar, really, but you can have a look later on. These are the links of, they are very useful in terms of talking about ARCP. It tells you about the curriculum, how ARCP works, and how your eportfolio works and documents as well. So read through them whenever you have time. I think one of the documents has about 100 pages. So don't read through the whole thing. Read the ones that are going to be useful to you, really. So yeah, that's basically it. Anybody has any questions about ARCP? Sorry. No? Okay, fine. Anyone has any questions in terms of the portfolio or ARCP? Anything? If there are no questions, that will probably be the end of my session. It is a short session. They're quite kind of simple topics, really. But like I said, a few tips and tricks. Make sure you upload all the certificates as soon as possible. Don't wait because you will forget. Write out a list at the beginning after you confirm what are the requirements for the whole F1 or F2 year, and kind of, I know it's a tick box exercise, but it is something that will make things much more simple as the year progresses, really. And then tick through each of them. I would write down a few boxes for ticks for each of them, because you one tick for done, the second tick would be for sent, the third tick would be if your supervisor has signed it off. So 3 ticks and that thing is done. Then make sure that you book and plan all the required kind of ALS, PSA orders as soon as possible. Upload the certificates as soon as possible. Do the e-learnings as well. And remember to link the curriculum to those 20 professional curriculums that are required. Don't wait to the end. Do it as soon as possible, because it does take a lot of time and effort to kind of go through each of them. Right, so the feedback and the link was to talk on QIP and auditing. Oh, is that right? Let me just check and see, just a minute.